Hello, everybody. This is Matthew Brand. Welcome to the Man in the Creek podcast. And today I am talking about the JR Alternative Cigars. Now, what are these? These are basically the house blend version of the cigars you get when, premium cigars. They're like a cheaper alternative, the best way to put it, like, right, the store brand of the same type. And there's nothing wrong with that. But one thing I should mention is that a lot of times you don't get reviews on things like this, even when it comes to the regular house cigar. So let's say if you go to, here we have Wild Bill's. So if you go to something like Wild Bill's and you want to pick up one of their house blends or one of their own personal blends, they don't really have a lot of people reviewing them to say how good they are, what they taste like, is it worth getting, whatever the case may be, right? It's basically tobacco. It's so cheap, you're not really going to necessarily bother, um, caring that much. Like when you buy one of those cigars, you just kind of want a cigar. It's not, a super celebration, so to speak. It's like going to, I don't know, it's the equivalent of getting a bottle of wine and getting $2 chuck and doing a review on it, right? It's cheap wine, it's $3. What were you expecting? But when it comes to the JR cigars, even though I would still say, yeah, it may be worth doing a review on the, let's say a bunch Wild Bill's house blends because there's so many of them. You may want something different or want something particular. If you're looking for that, why not get that particular blend? But if you are dealing with the JR cigars, a lot of times, at least in the one that here in Michigan, in the Southfield area, they come in bundles. They may sell a few of them individually, and a lot of times they're not even clearly labeled which ones they are. But most of the time they come in bundles. So even though you're getting them for a very affordable price per stick, you're still probably shelling out somewhere around the $50 mark to just to try them out. So before you shell out $50, how are they? And how do they compare to the brands that they're supposedly copycatting? Well, I will say this, from what I can tell, almost all the cigars that they tend to copycat in the first place, if you're interested, are almost all Cubanistic blends. What I mean by that is, what I mean by Cuban-esque is Cuban cigars or Cuban C cigars, whatever you want to call it, they go for a particular flavor profile. It's a tobacco-y taste that's very unique. It doesn't taste like just plain tobacco. It has a certain characteristic to it. I'd almost say maybe I don't want to say exotic, but much different than what you get when you just smoke a more bland cigar. Then on top of that, you get ones that are even more unique, right? Have really interesting flavor, but they still have it's still within that tobacco-ish realm, right? Maybe different flavored tobacco. Where if you go to a more American-esque cigar, I guess, or one that's more catered towards new age Americans and whatnot, you're getting more along the lines of Maduros that are like chocolatey, coffee, stuff. Those kind of flavor profiles. Even though they're not right, they have necessarily flavored like chocolate. Those some are. Those are the notes you get. Where with the Cuban ones, it's more of a unique tobacco taste, but pure, strong, good, clean, good flavored tobacco. That's all I can really say about it. Right? It's a difference between having a steak that's a really, really good steak, but just seasoned really good, where you really taste the beef, as opposed to like having a steak that may have A1 on it, or having a steak that was like marinated in something particular before it was cooked and grilled and served, or you know you could tell the difference in certain potatoes. Yes, you could just really taste a really good potato, but then you also have potatoes that are seasoned with this or that or whatnot. Um, a coffee is a really good example, right? Sometimes you have a coffee that has notes of honey. Sometimes you have coffee that has notes of kind of chocolatey notes, kind of dark earthy notes that are more acidic. And really, really good coffee tends to be just plain good, whatever coffee that people like tends to have a particular flavor. It just tastes like really good coffee. Where other coffees may be more hazelnut, right? They try to lean, add flavors to a hazelnut. mocha, and that I would say the more American cigars where the really good coffee just tastes like really good coffee, and that's how Cubanesque cigars taste. For example, I am smoking the right now the Hoyo de Monterrey. Excuse me if I butchered that, right? And this is a very Cubanesque tasting cigar. The was it the VF 1990? I won't say 1998. That was a very Cubanesque tasting cigar. It has those flavors to it. Where when my old go-to cigar, I would say, is the what do you call that thing? The Undercrown. This is about as far from a Cuban as you can get, though it is a very popular cigar, right? It's not flavored as far as I, ever told. So, but it still has very unique, dark, sweeter notes, right? Usually a lot sweeter. So that being the case, uh, if you like Cubanesque cigars or want to taste Cubanesque cigars or cigars that are made to be tasted like Cubanesque cigars, those JR alternatives are a good route to go to. Now, so the real things you're kind of wondering when it comes to those type of alternative cigars, there's a few things, right? One, or a few things I was wondering when I was testing them all out. One, do they taste like their counterpart? That will be the main character. Because even if you really, really want, like, let's say you really like 1964 Padrones Anniversario, right? But those are expensive. They can be like $14, $20 a stick, or more, depending on which one you get. But you can go to get the JR alternative, and yes, you spent around $50, but you got 20 of them, right? Which is a lot less than $15, $20 a stick, right? You would only been able to get three, you know, four sticks max if you had bought them, off the shelf, the real brand. Where instead you got 20. So if you really like those, how did they compare? Well, personally, I found the tobacco. I broke a few open. They all seem to be premium cigars, right? They don't seem to be like butchered up uh, cigars. But I did notice that some of them were rolled a little looser than what I noticed the alternatives are. However, I will also say that I noticed that they burn very similarly. A lot of these Cubanesque cigars don't burn as evenly as the more I should say Americanized New Age cigars, right? Another brand that I would say is very Cubanesque brand, which probably had a lot of these Cubanesque brands also have brands in Cuba, right? They have their Cuban brand and you have their American brand. And I could be wrong on the names when thinking about this, but the many that come to mind are Romeo and Juliet, Cohiba. I know I said Romeo and Juliet or Julieta, however you want to pronounce it, but you get what I mean. Um, that the Cohiba, the J. Hupman cigars, they I believe have their brands in Cuba and their brands in America, but they both have that Cubanesque taste. But I've noticed that those cigars they don't always have the best of burns. The Padron Anniversario 1964, even though I that is a go-to cigar for a lot of people that they love that taste, and me included, it does not have as even of as a burn as some of these newer cigars that are coming out. But true to you know true to it, these newer cigars that come out, they seem to have that similar kind of burn. And I think it's just the type of tobacco it is, not really. So I think they're using the right type of tobacco instead of just like some crap tobacco that seems to completely burn on one side and not the other. It's a very unique type of burn. So, one, they hold up quality wise, but I do notice that they are a bit looser. They, it's like Jay Upman to me has a very tight draw, a very very tight draw. That's all I can really say about it. It is one of the tightest draws I've ever had in a cigar. I have not noticed that similarity when trying out the uh, JR brand on some of the cigars that I do know have tight draws, like the um, what should I call it? The which one was it? The one of the Monte Cristos, right? They have Monte Cristo, they have the Padron Anniversario, they have Cohiba. I have not noticed the same, but the flavor profile is there. So only thing I'll notice differently is the draws on some of them, but the flavor profile is there. However, I do notice they seem to get that looser draw tends to make them hotter towards the end, and they seem to smoke a bit faster, so they don't last as long as some of the ones I've had. Other than that, I would definitely recommend trying JR cigar alternatives. I would say that the other ones seem to be a bit, if you're looking for a longer smoke, more quality smoke, they are definitely in the flavor profile, but not quite the real McCoy. Now, sometimes when you have off brands, you get the, I don't know, something that's really the same thing. I'm not talking about cigars, but sometimes you get the exact same thing. It just has a different label on it, right? Like the people who, when you go buy certain drugs, sometimes they're the same person making all the same different pills. They just label them differently, and depending on who buys them, they charge what they want to charge and put the brand names that are more eye level, and then the off brands off to the side, but they're there and they're cheaper for whatever reason. I don't, people are paying for the name. But when it comes to cigars, I don't know really how that goes about. I don't know if those are like factory seconds, if JR just works with all these companies and buys up their factory seconds, or if they're familiar with the blends, because these are usually the older blends. These are not like the stuff that came out yesterday, right? I didn't see a JR alternative for, like I said, Underground. I didn't see a JR alternative for Java. Those are both Drew Estate. I didn't see a JR alternative for My Father Cigars. I didn't, which is maybe a more boutique brand, but just this is very popular. So it wouldn't be mind blowing to see, think, oh, maybe I'd want an alternative to that. It's usually the old cigars. And one note, there are a lot of cigars that aren't made anymore. It is something to take into consideration. Like I think, and I could be wrong, but I think I was looking up Michael Jordan's favorite cigar, and when I went to go, I was like, oh, I would like to try out, if it's his favorite. He smokes 6 cigars a day, it must be good. I would like to try out what his favorite cigar is. I think it's not sold anymore. But JR Alternatives, if when you don't want that kind of flavor profile, they have one in that category. Excuse the background noise. I'm in Detroit. I don't know what you expect. Moving on, if you want a Cuban that's tasting cigar, and you want one that tastes more like the actual Cuban version, they have alternatives to those too, as opposed to the American one that just is made out of maybe Cuban products or Cuban seed. These are just things to take into consideration. JR cigars, those bundles, they're not bad. I definitely think they are worth the money. Now, how do I find that they compare to the other affordable alternatives? And that would be the third thing. So the first one, what's the quality of them, right? Are they any good? I would say yes. The draw seems to be a bit looser than more premium cigars, but I broke a few open. It seems like it's long filler to me. I'm not an expert, but it looks like long filler. That meaning like it's not crumbled up stuff that's leftover scraps. And if it is, it might be long. The long fillers that wasn't good enough to wrap on the outside. That's typical of a lot of cigar companies. So the quality is good. Does it taste like their counterparts? Well, as far as I can tell, with the few that I've smoked counterparts, like tried to compare and put them together, the Monte Cristo, the Patron Anniversario, the Cohiba, they taste comparable, but they're all in that realm of Cubanesque cigars. So the flavor differential is not as large as jumping with all the ones I've tasted, as jumping from once again a J. Upman to a Undercrown, or I almost said Taurus Judge, or My Father the Judge, or things in that of that nature, right? Or Liga Privada, right? Or I'm trying to think of something something that's not Drew Estate makes a lot of cigars, don't they? You're not getting. I didn't see any alternatives to Deadwood. The Deadwood cigars, or else I would have bought those in the Mississippi second. So that's just something to consider, right? So moving on, those. So yeah, they may be comparable, but they're comparable because they're all in the same basic realm, right? And in one case, that can make them all kind of comparable to each other, where one may be a bit more smoother of a smoke than another, right? You may be comparing something that's a Maduro and it's really fat to something that's a Connecticut and is really smooth. So, but they're all kind of in that same flavor area, is what I'm saying. So the third one, how do they compare to other budget cigars, right? Because if you're buying these, there are other budget cigars that you can get in bundles for the same price. Which ones would I prefer? Well, if you're looking for a different flavors or a particular flavor profile of that Cuban cigars, yeah, go for it. If you want to try like something like deep, chocolatey, earthy, you may be better off with a factory smoke. If you like that good, clean, great tobacco taste, but you don't really, like that Cuban nest taste, or you don't necessarily want that Cuban nest taste, you may be better off going with say this wrong probably, but the Newmans, right? The JC Newmans. I apologize if I said the wrong name because I'm not reading from the script, but I have had those before. They're usually labeled with numbers, right? I think they're called factory throwouts, right? They're affordable, but they're good. I mean, they're really good. I have no complaint with them. As a matter of fact, after all the budget cigars that I've smoked, um, I'd say that the JC Newman was one that did not get old for me by the time I was done with them, because you buy them in a bundle. So if somebody gives me a bundle of them, so you get, let's say somebody buys me 25 cigars, right? At the end of the 25 cigars, I'm not going to say names, but some of the ones that weren't JC Newman, they started tasting really nasty to me. And I was like, okay, well, maybe it's just me. Maybe I had these too long. They weren't humid the way they were supposed to be. Let me, go buy a brand new one, try it out, see if it tastes different. Nope. They, after a while, I just kind of get this bad taste in my mouth for them. Another one I can say that didn't get a bad taste, but the Trader Jacks. If you were around me earlier in the year, I was probably had a lot of Trader Jacks. Had a bag of them. They were, uh, what is that, present or something? I don't remember. But I got a bag of the Trader Jack Maduros. They were really good at first, but after a while, it's like after I would smoke one, I would just have that flavor in my mouth and almost seemed like in my lung for the rest of the day. And even when I could taste them just being around the area. They're very aromatic. It says it on the bag, so I'm not blaming them for having them. It's clearly a dessert cigar for a once in a while, but that's kind of the thing. It's for once in a while. If it's, I would not make that a daily smoker. The factory smokes, they're those Maduros. A lot of people swear by them, and they are great. But after a while, that it becomes quite a taste in your mouth. And if I can move on to the even the JC Newmans, I like sweet cigars. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, I said I was smoking the Trader Jacks, but some cigars don't taste great with that sweet stuff on it. Like some cigars, it blends in well, especially Maduros, because Maduros are kind of sweet in the first place. I think I've liked the Flor de Sol. I could be saying that wrong, but I think that's one that was called that. There was one I liked called Deadwood. There's I like the Trader Jack ones once in a while, like as a one-off dessert cigar. Um, I like a lot of these cigars, right? But oh my goodness, the the sweet JC Newmans, they don't seem to blend well with the tobacco. Same thing when you go to those Wild Bill ones, right? I have the Wild Bill sweet cigars. It's not that the flavor on the tip is so nasty, unless it's that one I think is trying to I think it's trying to replicate the taste of acid, the acid cigars. I can't think of what they call it at the moment. It says they have I don't know if it's called like psychedelic or something weird. It has a weird name to their own particular Wild Bill blend of cigars. The Nirvana, it's called the Nirvana. That I didn't like the taste of, but I also don't like the taste of acid, so I can't really say that, with any certainty. But in the vanilla one, they had just tastes like straight cheap. What do they call that thing? The artificial vanilla, like really cheap, nasty artificial, like the kind when you get like a really cheap ice cream cone, or let's say you bought a bunch of vanilla bars at the Dollar Tree, and they only cost $1, but you got a bunch of them, as opposed to like the one good sandwich. You got a bunch of really cheap sandwiches, and you got it home and you ate it, and you're like, that is very artificial tasting, right? Very chemical. That's what the vanilla tastes like on the Wild Bill cigars. So I can like a sweet cigar, like I like Java. I had the uh, Macanudo, M by Macanudo, that was like coffee flavored. That was okay. It wasn't mind blowing. It barely tasted, to be completely honest. Honestly, the Javas kind of out to me too. All the Javas I really care for. I didn't really do the mint one, but the rest of them, I'm like, yeah, they taste good. And for people who don't care for tobacco, they smell better than some cigars do. When the scent lingers around. Um, it's just people who don't always like cigars, they don't always care for the scent of them afterwards. So that being the case, I like flavored cigars, but those cheaper cigars that are flavored, those J.C. Newmans, sweets, they're not for me, just personally. But some people, I think if your typical cigar is like an acid or a flavored cigar, or you're, just doing a bump up for, like, some people, they smoke the black and milds, and then that cigar is like a bump up for them, right? They're just bumping up from the flavored black and mild that they normally have. I'm not knocking them for it, but it's different. Anyway, with the J.C. Newmans, I like those, I would say, equally. Equally is hard. Maybe equally in different ways. I really do like these. Hold on, Jessa, but sorry about that. My son was calling me. But anyway, I like these for different reasons. Like, I do like that clean. Um, I don't know how to explain it. That Cubanist tobacco taste. I really, really do like that. Now, I know it's probably not made in Cuba. Sometimes I hear that the Cubanesque tobacco made in other places is better than the actual tobacco done in Cuba. Um, that's, I think, because the Cubans pump out so much tobacco that they don't really get to let things rest. But man, man, oh man, it's hard to compare. I guess it just goes on what flavor you're looking for at the time. But if you're a real fan of a particular cigar, and you like, let's say that cigar is $20 or even $10, and you just want something to tie you off, until you get to smoke the real one, I think those JR cigars are pretty good. If you think, I would not say they are as great as the ones that are comparable, but they work, right? They're not bad. They work. I think they're sometimes smaller, a little bit looser of a draw. I haven't had they've all had a consistent draw for me. It didn't matter which brand I was smoking. The burn may have been a bit different, but the draw all seemed the same across each one, and the flavor seemed different, but still like kind of like that same kind of wrapping. And maybe that's like the quality control that they have at whatever factory they're made at. Now, is that a bad thing? I don't necessarily think so. It doesn't bother me at all, actually, until I get to the end of like the last third. I notice the last third seems to burn very hot when I smoke the JR cigars. That's just me. Yes, some people call it, oh, it's a bit of pepper on the retro hill. Like, no, this is hot. Like, I can't hold it, in my near my lips. Maybe you could tuck it in a pipe or something like that and finish it off, but near my lips is just too hot. even if I pinched them with some tongs. It's too hot. So, which yeah, maybe you can make it work, but I would say at that point you're kind of screwing with the enjoyment. Where I've noticed other cigars, I've been able to more robust cigars, I've been able to smoke farther that had like kind of a tighter wrap to it. What else can I really say about them? I mean, they're would I say they're better than the factory Maduros? I guess it goes with what flavor you're looking for, right? If you're looking for if you like Underground and that's your favorite like go to kind of cigar, I'd say you're better off with the factory smokes. Just my personal opinion. Are they all long filler quality like these JR cigars? No, but that's the flavor profile you're headed towards. Now, if you're talking, you like just clean cut tobacco like you get at a lot of factory stores that they're selling their own, house cigars, right? But you want a better quality one. I'd say go with the J.C. Newman. I'd be so silly if I'm saying the wrong name the whole time, but I would better go with those. But if you want that Cubanist quality, old fashioned, go with what works. It's like a celebration, but you don't want anybody to know that they're not the same cigars, right? You know, slap them in the box, give them as a gift. They're great. Those JR cigars are great. I've given those away. I hand them to people. I say, look, man, this is a good cigar. I like them, right? I would not compare them to a really trash cigar that I've had at a lot of house shops. These are good cigars for the couple bucks. Now, would I say I would pay a comparable price, like $5 for them, if I got a fat one? But I notice these tend to be on the smaller side, and they don't last as long. So, the $5 that they sell them for individually, that's pushing it a bit. But if you just want to try out that kind of cigar, or you're like, hey, I want that more expensive one, but that more expensive one is like $20. Maybe I can try out this alternative one before I shell out, for $5 before I shell out $20 for the really nice one. I'd say go ahead and do that. And that's what these are good for. They're good for trying out a flavor profile before, biting the bullet and buying the big one, or a box of the big ones. Or maybe they're good, for if you already like that brand, but you want something to tie you off and you don't want to spend, smoke several $20 bills up, light up several $20 bills every day as you're smoking more often. It's just my thought. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you tolerating this. Peace out.